Welcome to Alan Skorsky Reports. I'm Alan Skorsky. Over the last 2 years, social media has exploded with anti-Semitism, not seen since 1930s Germany. First, following the October 7th Hamas massacre and kidnapping of Israelis, it was the Islamists, jihadists, and Marxists. Then, over the last year, we began witnessing virulent anti-Semitism from the right, coming from people like Tucker Carlson and those he openly platforms. At the same time, I found new friends amongst the family of Christians who became very vocal in their support of Israel and the Jewish people. One such person is Dr. Tim Orr, a Christian evangelical leader whose writings proved to be more academic and intellectual than any others I've read online in years. He is currently offering an online course titled Architecture of Antisemitism, Structure, Not Just Hatred. For Dr. Orr, a pivotal moment came on October 7th, 2023, when he witnessed anti-Semitic protests in London before Israel had even responded. Following October 7th, Dr. Orr wrote, "What I felt most was that the church there was very weak, and that weakness carried a cost. That disorientation deepened when I watched American and European universities erupt days later with the same slogans and emotional choreography. It was then I realized, according to Dr. Orr, that I was witnessing the expression of a coherent transnational worldview, not a series of isolated events." Dr. Orr looks at how anti-Semitism operates in today's political, media, and activist spaces, not just as hatred, but as a system that adapts and hides in plain sight, and how Islamist movements and narratives play a role in spreading that in the West. He brings a clear, evidence-based perspective to topics that are often misunderstood or deliberately blurred. Dr. Orr is the author of 6 books, including his forthcoming book, Anti-Semitism is More Than Hatred, It's a System. How it works, why it persists, and how it adapts to every age. Dr. Orr, it's an honor to
Well,
finally meet you in person or
it is
via
great to
Zoom.
be here. Absolutely.
Okay, so again, I've read a lot of your posts on Facebook, and you're not one of those people who just writes a little paragraph with, a punch to the gut, but you write very intellectually and very academically. And I'll just tell my viewers they have to follow you on Facebook. It's Dr. Tim Orr, ORR, and that I have to read your material 2 or 3 times just to understand it. So, like I said before we began, I'm going to give you the floor. So you spoke about October 7th, and you are someone who earned one of your many master's degrees was in Islam that you got from the London school, the Islamic school in London, and how when you traveled there, you studied under the tutelage of a Shiite Muslim leader, and how October 7th changed a lot of what you saw, including your relationship with these people. So with that, the floor is yours, Dr. Orr.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's certainly great to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity. But yeah, I originally came in contact with Islamic colleagues for the sole purpose of studying there, and it was more of an interfaith kind of effort.
Right.
And so what happened was, and it was kind of unexpected, they kind of welcomed me into the Shiite intellectual realm.
Right.
So I was able to speak at one time in Oxford through one of their campus events, and I was able to do that. I spoke at uh, um, their conferences and that kind of thing, the mosque and so on, because I felt welcome. I didn't feel like was any hindrance in the engagement. There wasn't any correction.
Right.
However, October 7th completely uh, uh, changed my paradigm on that. I had landed there in London on October 7th. I was en route from Chicago to there, so I wasn't even aware of what was going on. And so, of course, you get off the plane and you turn on the phone, and all of a sudden, I see what is going on. And I was even on a text string and I saw the comments, and it was frightening, to say the least. I heard the word apartheid and genocide and all those things. And what's interesting there, those are from people their minds were already made up.
Right.
And so it was very emotional time. I'm sitting there in the hotel room wondering how I'm going to answer this because I was supposed to be in Iran the next month.
Iran?
Iran. I was there going to present my research at University of Tehran. And I was scheduled to do even some interfaith engagement in Qum. And of course, that immediately was canceled. I told them even that night, I said, no way am I going to do this. But what really shocked me was what happened the next day. Because I get in the Uber car and I'm traveling to my destination, and I already saw the protests that were going on, and I heard the claims, and at that time it was kind of in the hundreds, I guess. But I learned later that people were getting permits to protest 4 hours after the event of October 7th.
Right.
And so what I saw writ large was a merger of two movements, the Red Green Alliance, as some call it,
Right.
because I saw the woke left, and I had university experience. That wasn't terribly surprising. Then there is the Islam. So global progressivism, global Islam, which really have very little in common. And but yet they were protesting almost arm in arm, and they were responding in the same cause.
Right.
What was frightening is when you understand all the details of what happened. And Hamas, in its that ideology, in its very nature, that is a performance that needs to be cast into an audience so you can see so they can see God vindicating and that kind of thing. And so what happened there was not private. They had it on video. But what I saw was a complete lack of empathy of any kind. And so that again was problematic. But I was also going here and there that week because I was there meeting with Shia leaders.
Right.
Those were some very interesting conversations. And I remember going in all of those conversations and wondering, what in the world do I say? You know? And so I'm kind of talking, and they're asking my opinion. Of course, I'm giving it. And, but 18, I think I went on 21 Uber rides. I think 18 of them were contentious. And
A
so
question:
that,
when you were meeting with the Shia leaders, they were asking your opinion, but this was like right after October 7th.
yeah,
So,
it was that week.
right,
While I was there, and they were asking my opinion. I think they were trying to gauge where I was at.
right. Your opinion on what Hamas did, or your opinion on Israel in general? What were they asking?
Yeah, pretty much what my views of Israel was.
Right.
They knew I was an evangelical, so I'm sure they suspected kind of
Right.
where I would be. Of course, I've always been a supporter of Israel, so that wasn't new. But that's not something I ever mentioned while I was there. We would talk about Islamic texts
Right.
and that kind of thing. And so the conversations were a little tame. I was still in shock. And I didn't know really what to do, and it really hadn't sunk into what happened.
At shock at what level? Because we talk about the protests or the Shia leaders themselves. Were they saying, yes, this is a victory for Allah? Like, what was it that
No,
you were?
the Shia leaders were very reserved,
Okay,
and all their statements were very calculated.
right,
And I think, they're in the West, and so they're used to sort of you got the in-house language,
right,
and you got the with the regular community, and given what they probably assumed my stance were, they were very calculated and very, very calm
right.
in their demeanor. That didn't show, but I would say that wasn't. They weren't all like that. I had a couple that people that got very angry with me, but the anger started when I began to go public about my support of Israel. And remember, as I mentioned just a little while ago, that I had been welcomed into the Shia Islamic academic world.
Right.
That was completely cut off at that point.
What did you say that was the trigger?
Yeah, well, I was, well, one thing, because when I got home, I was there, I watched what was going on in universities.
Right,
And see, sort of the moment there in London, I realized like never before how much Islamism had really infiltrated the West. So I got home. I saw it in the universities. Again, I wasn't totally surprised, but you had the historic BDS movement, all that kind of
right,
thing. But they were saying for the river to the sea.
right,
But what's interesting about that is a lot of the activists interpret that through sort of this woke activism. We're protesting against that. When they heard words, the river to the sea, a lot of them didn't know what that meant.
right,
Which river, which sea.
right,
But the Islamicists who were organizing the protest knew exactly what it was about.
right,
And so I'm seeing there, I had this education. I knew what was going on in other countries. And so I said, I got to speak out. And I began to criticize publicly, primarily on Facebook, about this and criticizing that. And all of a sudden, I got a lot of resistance. And one of the professors there at Islamic College said, I wish I never would have wrote anything positive for you. And that's all I did. And that gives you something there that tells something there. Because in an academic environment, you should have intellectual diversity. And so when those things emerge, what you should say is, okay, let's discuss that. But
right,
there was none of that. There was a shutdown and a complete ostracization. And so I knew I had been getting I touched the nerve, and then I began to expose some of the Shia eschatology
okay,
and how that and try to help uh, um, uh, Americans and Westerners understand this. Sometimes we don't understand religion and particularly this type of religion. And it was part of sort of their eschatological framework, their end time framework. And so I began to write a lot on that. And of course, I got a lot of pushback on that, but I think that to speak, you want to be truthful, and that's the only thing that will combat a lie. And so that's the approach I took then, and that's the approach I take now.
Right. So let me ask you a question. So this is again, I'm taking some from some of your writings.
Sure.
Um, when Israel is a symbol, every Israeli action is interpreted negatively because symbols are judged by their natures, not by their circumstances. When
Hmm.
Israel uses force, it is not responding to a threat, but revealing its nature. When it exhibits restraint, it is merely biding time and accused of cruelty by inaction. And then you continue, there is no space for tragedy, since tragedy exists only when two legitimate claims are in conflict, and Israel is denied legitimacy from the outset.
Hmm.
So this is something that I have always said that um, people who don't know treat Israel and the Palestinian cause as if they're a couple getting divorced.
Yeah.
And both sides have, they're good, both sides have the bad, and his side, her side, something in the middle. Instead of understanding that whether you like it or not, and I'm Jewish and I'm
Uh,
biased, doesn't matter. Israel is the good guy. They don't have to be the perfect guy. Whereas the
right.
Palestinian cause was invented, it is historically a
Yeah.
it's not a legitimate cause. But again, now we're in 2025, so of course people don't know the history,
Yeah.
and they're treated almost as if they're equal. But Israel has one side, Palestinians have another side, and they're trying to control the narrative to make it like they're the good ones,
Hmm.
Israel is the bad ones.
Right.
And
Right.
people who don't know any better, and this again is just one element of anti-Semitism.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're exactly right. What everything that Palestinians do is contextualized. Anything that Israel does is vilified and judged.
Right,
It doesn't matter. I think that anti-Semitism is hatred, but it's also a structure.
right,
And what it does is it becomes an explanation for a group or a country why they are failing. You look at Nazi Germany, for instance. They after World War One, they were, they lost the war, but they wanted to regain that that prestige that they had, and so Hitler came in. And so why aren't we doing that? They didn't want to look at their own moral failures. What they wanted is a scapegoat,
right,
and the scapegoat was the Jews. Now, they didn't just want to punish the Jews, they wanted sort of a hygienic mode. They wanted to get rid of them completely. And so I think history is replete with those kinds of instances with anti-Semitism. We see this sometimes. I'm not a fan of Andrew Tate at all,
right.
but he made an interesting observation
That's going
lately.
viral right now.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
yeah,
say it.
yeah, and he was exactly right. He said, "Why are the young men in this country so angry?" And he told them, and he went through a whole litany of reasons, and we need someone to blame, and the Jews are that group.
Right, but I think he said, get a girlfriend, get a house, and you'll stop blaming the Jews for your problems. Something along the knows he was saying, you're a
Yeah,
bunch of losers. You
right,
can't get a
right.
girlfriend, you can't get a house, you don't have a good job. Blame the Jews. I mean, I'm almost verbatim what he said.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. And they kind of interpret this framework of, I think, particularly on that side, conspiracy theories
Right,
begin to lend to that. And because they're wanting a scapegoat. And
right,
it's the same thing on the left. Why doesn't their utopian dream come about? You know, let's look for a scapegoat. It's the West and it's the Jews. So yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, so now you bring me out to another question I have, distinguishing between right and left-wing anti-Semitism. This is something
Mhm.
that I've written. The differences between the left and the right wing. From the left, it's about quote unquote social justice.
Yes.
So, in order to keep themselves free of prejudice, they call it anti Zionism. But
Yes.
from the right, it's about the Jews. Tucker Carlson, for example, he won't attack the Jews, so he attacks two very prominent conservative Jews, Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro.
Hmm.
Tucker
Hmm.
Carlson has said it is immoral to hate somebody for how they were born. In other words, to hate Jews because they're born Jewish, that's immoral.
Yeah.
But he then goes and accuses Ben Shapiro of celebrating killing of kids in Gaza, and he says that Ben Shapiro hates white Christians. So
Hmm.
this is how he doesn't have to say, I don't hate Jews because of how they're born. I just hate them for what they believe or what I say they believe in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think you're right. First of all, the progressive left interprets everything through the vantage points in social justice.
Right,
They divide the world into oppressed and oppressor. And what's interesting, how their beliefs are pretty ahistorical, because to treat Jews as white, that's sort of the sort of preconceived idea of the oppressor.
right,
And so they kind of redo that, and they look at it, they adopt the Palestinianism
right,
as almost a fundamentalist religion.
right,
And they speak in very absolute terms. There is nothing, there's no nuance ever. And there's definitely no nuance there. There's nuance when you talk about Palestinians, because what happens is that they contextualize. Well, if you grew up in this environment, you would, so
right,
and so. Mandani's dad wrote a book, and he talked about how he was contextualizing suicide bombers, and we need to understand where they're coming from. No, we understand what they did and judge it properly. So it has a distorted view there. And it's been interesting to see what is going on the right, because that's something I didn't expect.
we
Uh,
were
uh,
all caught
um,
off guard.
yeah, yeah. I mean, some of the people, some of the loudest voices, and you can see them on YouTube, were very pro-Israel. And I think they had certain nationalistic sort of aspirations that weren't fulfilled like they wanted to.
Right,
So instead of kind of doing some self-examination, they needed a scapegoat, and the Jews become that scapegoat.
right,
And of course, one of the major offenders used to work for Dennis Prager, used to work for Ben Shapiro,
right,
Candace Owen,
right,
probably the worst offender. And what happens is, I think, what what sells now, because in the internet you need engagement, and rage will sell, but we found something that will even sell better, and that's conspiracy theory.
right,
What happens next? What happens next? And I think there's truly hatred in her heart, but there's also she is getting enriched by her Jew hatred, which makes it even more despicable. And Tucker Carlson, the same thing. And I was shocked in how the Heritage Foundation
yeah,
reacted to that. I did some Newsmax interviews, and I talked about that, and that was just uh, I was watching some of our great conservative institutions begin to cave under this.
right,
And so that really sounded alarm, not just to me, but a lot of people, and particularly the Jewish community. and those who care very deeply about the Jewish community and are very educated about anti-Semitism. And so now you have the right, the left, Islam, and they were all
Yeah.
sort of in that same bed, so to speak.
Right. So let me ask you a question. There's just another quote from you. Anti-Semitism persists not only because it is protected, but because institutions and cultures continue to choose it for its usefulness, which you alluded to earlier.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
offers a ready explanation for failure, resentment, and moral unease, and it allows societies under strain to direct judgment outward while preserving a sense of righteousness. And it does this by rendering Jews abstract enough to blame and unreal enough to disregard.
yes, yes. And I think that's when we look at some people look at anti-Semitism as just another outworking of racism,
Right.
and that is a completely not a accurate way to do it. One, it's the longest history, and so we see that generation, 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 generation. But in all of those instances, there are things that are consistent in how they're consistent in conspiracy. They're consistent in having abstract, looking at Jews as an abstract, not a people, not a person,
Right.
not people that have differing views. But it's one view, and because they want a cause to blame it. So you can't have nuance if that's your motivation. And so that's what I see a lot
Right.
in
Right.
this.
Can you talk about you've got a new book coming out about
Yeah,
anti-Semitism? Can you again? It's about structure. Can you
yeah,
talk
yeah.
about that?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
I'll
I
still
think
buy the book. I'll still
okay.
buy the book, but
Well, good, good. I think what I do is I talk about the structure, but then I deal with Christian anti-Semitism, Islamic anti-Semitism. I deal with sort of the online anti-Semitism, and I sort of interpret all of these through the lens of the structural analysis. And for instance, Christian anti-Semitism, um, there's a theological term, actually two terms they use. They kind of mean the same thing: supersessionism and replacement theology.
right,
And in other words, the Jews, church replaced the Jews in the story, and so they're no longer needed. And there were a lot of things that came out as a result of that. Islamic anti-Semitism, I think, took place even during the time of Muhammad. Now, when you look at how the Quran talks about the Jews and the Christians, you will see that the Christian are much more favored, so to speak, much more negative for the Jews. The Jews were more rejecting the message there. And of course, that was very much a threat to Muhammad. So, as it's traditional scholarship said it was a 23-year period that the revelation's there. So you have to look at it what you call diachronically, and that means you have to look at it unfolds over time. So you see him making adjustments.
right,
Because at the first, and these are the scriptures that are always quoted, that at first he had the idea that of a monoistic faith that everybody was kind of buy into. But reality set in. And so as the Quran begins to develop its theme, its story, you see a more antagonistic kind of thing towards the Jews. And then stop in the Quran. You see the early writing, you see in the Hadith literature a lot of things. So that there is a structure, and I kind of go and I don't write it like high. It's in plain language, but I think it's important for Americans, people in the West in particular, to really understand Islam. That is one of the problems. So that's why I included that section in the book.
Right.
The algorithmic.
Algorithm, yeah.
Yeah. And that's important because that plays a real role. Um, Let me give you an example. ISIS really mastered the online space and how to propagandize their message. But what followed was this, that there were other Islamicist movements, the Muslim Brotherhood, have really spent a lot of time, and Iran as well, a lot of time in how to craft their message. So, and they do it online as well, TikTok and
Right.
Instagram and that kind of thing.
So,
And so yeah, so I knew with all these subjects, I kind of bring in the structure and to kind of help people understand maybe what's happening.
yeah. So you also write on social media. You write a lot about also Iran.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, Now again, Iran, they are Shiite, and
Yes.
and you
Uh-huh.
and you studied under, and you were going to speak what? So you were going to speak in the University of Tehran. You said
Yes.
what
Uh-huh.
was that going to be about? And was this with the blessing? I'm assuming it was of the supreme leader.
Well,
Uh,
I don't know how what the politics are. Obviously, um, the the government or the Ayatollah rather
right,
has jurisdiction even on, they're not completely academic free. There's not freedom of
right,
inquiry. And so there are limitations. I actually spoke on a different topic, and that was Islamic feminism. Yeah, it's now I have so much other things
right,
to write about. I'm kind of put that to the side. But yeah, that was my topic there. And um, yeah, I was also going to go to Qum. Qum is where the seminary is.
right,
There in Iran. And that's where they teach their future mullahs and that kind of thing. So they were going to invite me there. One of the guys I met while at Islamic College actually has an institute there. So that was the connection.
right,
And one of the guys that was part there at Islamic College that I befriended was kind of worked that thing. So it got there, but obviously October 7th, I said, no way.
right.
But yeah,
Great.
but I think that uh, I think this will be helpful to kind of get back to the sort of the theological and what they believe.
Right,
They believe what is called the 12 infallible imams.
right.
And on the 12th imam, and this was, a long millennium before, he goes in what they call occultation. And what that means is he is sort of isolated, and I'm not really sure where this place is, but he's in isolation, and he'll come back one day resembling a lot of the ideas of the Christian Messiah. Okay, he'll come back and vindicate people. Jesus will come back at the same time too, and 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 he will say that uh, that he was not who the Christians say he was. That Muhammad was the last prophet,
Mm,
and yeah, and so there's a little bit of this sort of utopian idea like if we, and that fueled really the people of Iran, the government. Well, if we just do this and we go through difficult things, there is, we'll usher in the Mahdi is what it's called, and we'll usher him in, and so that sort of was used politicized to do that. But another thing, it's important to understand that Khomeini uh, uh, um, did interpreted the faith much differently than what is called the guardian of the jurist. And so what that means is that any time that you know there needs to be someone who can protect the faith, okay? And what they did was they gave that mantle up to the Mahdi. Well, he was arguing, no, there has to be somebody in place right now. And so he then empowered himself and he was the supreme ruler. And so it's interesting how that all came about. Of course, that was, I think, in the mid 60s. He's exiled out, and but through that time, he's sending cassette tapes and he's getting the clergy on their side. And they looked at sort of the westernization of Iran, and they said, well, what we need to do is get back to the Quranic ideas. We need to get back
Right.
to that. And so that's kind of some of the framework there.
Good. Dr. Orr, you're fascinating. I see also you teach at the University of Indiana, correct?
Well, I was a research associate, and that contract ended.
Okay.
So yeah, yeah.
So I was going to congratulate you on on the football championship.
I was absolutely elated. I'll just share a little bit about that.
Yeah.
I was an football fan as long as I can remember,
Right.
but I would stop watching it in October because that's when the Big Ten and they lose all the time.
Got it. Okay.
So now it was like a dream come true. So
Good. Well, this is Dr. Orr. Thank you so much. I'd love to have you back again.
yes.
As again as long as anti-Semitism is there, we will always need people like you, who help and explain, and support and try to fight back at it. So thank you so much for everything you do.
Oh,
Dr.
thank you.
Tim Orr, everybody find him on Facebook and are you on other social media outlets also, or?
Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Great. Okay. Dr. Orr, thank you so much.
Thank you.